Did it not do it? Did you hear it? Okay, well, anyways, we'll try. All right, so today we're going to continue on with the research process. So you guys, we're going to learn the process of generating and selecting research questions and understand the requirements of research questions. And then we're going to work together to generate some questions over a specific topic that I'm going to give you. There is no assignment for today. We just need to work together to generate those questions. So again, yesterday was a work day. You do need to be getting in anything that is past due to me. I'm not taking off points, but the class average is a 50. So we need to get that up. All right, so we're going to start the process of investigation by generating research questions. Does anybody know what a research question is? A question for research? Yeah, kind of. Okay. So now we know how to distinguish between MLA and APA, set up a paper in MLA, properly set up MLA and text citations, and works cited. We know how to utilize Purdue OWL to avoid being a workbeat, and now you know how to navigate the online databases, which should make your life a lot easier when it comes to in-text citations, right? It's a lot easier than using Purdue OWL, but it's always good to have Purdue OWL back there just in case, okay? Because you do have to be careful, not so much with the online databases, but you know how sometimes you'll use a citation generator? A lot of the times those are wrong. So it's a good starting point, and then you go check it against Purdue OWL and make your little corrections, okay? But the easiest thing is just to always use online databases because they are credible and you know that they are reliable, okay? So the question though is, how do we use all that? Well, it is all tied to research, but there is a process. The first thing you do is you choose a topic, then you collect background information, organize the information and citations. You're going to evaluate the information and write research questions, and then write a draft, edit, correct, revise, and then do the final. Now, I always bring the research question right here after choosing a topic, and I'll explain to you why, okay? So, have you ever had an instance where a teacher is like, hey, go write a paper on topic X, right? And it sounds easy, right? Oh, I can write about topic X, and then you start trying to write it, and you're like, well, let's say it's about the United States, right? Go write a paper about the United States. Sounds easy in theory, but then when you start doing it, you're like, well, I could write about the people, right? I could write about the food, I could write about all kinds of things. And so then it becomes really overwhelming and daunting, right? So by generating a research question, you're going to narrow that focus. So according to the University of South Florida Libraries, to begin the research process, you must first choose a topic. Despite the fact that choosing a topic sounds relatively easy, it can be daunting or intimidating. Now, luckily for you guys are in high school. In high school, normally teachers tell you what to write, right? We normally give you a prompt or we give you a topic. But even then, it can still be a little overwhelming. How many times have you looked at a prompt and thought, I don't know what to write, right? Yeah, so that can be a little difficult. So even if it's something as simple as a word or phrase like mental disorders, you're kind of like, well, I don't know exactly what to write. So what you need to do is generate a research question that's going to narrow that and help you focus it, okay? So before you can do any research, I ask that you do a research question first. So let's take a look at exactly what that is. So according to study.com, a research question is an answerable inquiry into a specific concern or issue. In layman's terms or in everyday terms, that's basically just an answerable question that guides your research into a specific topic or issue. Okay, so it's very specific and it has requirements. So can any question be a research question? Absolutely not. The first thing you always need to remember, if you can answer the question with a yes or a no, it is not a research question. Okay, so yesterday you guys did generate some on the board when I was not here, right? The problem with all three of those questions is I could answer them with yes or no. So is it a research question? No, they're just standard questions, right? They're still good questions. And I'm going to show you how to go from those type of questions or a prompt into a specific research question, or even just a topic into a research question. Okay, so for a research question, it must check all of these boxes. Even if there's one missing, it's not a research question. The first thing is it needs to be clear. It needs to be specific enough for your reader to understand without further explanation. So one statement and it's understood. Focus, it needs to be narrow enough to be answered thoroughly within the writing space required. So what's the max paper you guys have ever had to write? Two, right? 2, 3. So if I have a research question, what are the different effects of all the learning styles? Is that narrow enough for 2 pages?
Yes.
For all the learning styles?
Yeah.
How many learning styles are there?
Like there's 3 main ones, but there's like different categories.
Yeah, there's different categories. And so if I'm going to thoroughly answer all of them, do you think you can fit all of that into 2 pages?
No.
Absolutely not.
No, never
What you
know.
could do though is say, what are the different learning effects of an auditory learning style and a visual learning style, right? Now I can talk about just those 2 and I can condense it, right? So that's the same thing with if somebody said to go discuss all the religions of the United States. Can I fit that into a 2-page paper? Absolutely not, right? So you would have to narrow it. Concise. It's asked in the fewest words possible. Do you guys know what concise means?
Concise.
Concise. Okay, I'm gonna give you a real world example of what's not concise and what is. Have you ever gone to like your friend's house or asked a friend, hey, where's so-and-so?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, you know, Reed went over here and he was doing this and da, 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 da. And like after 5 minutes, he goes, but Reed's not here. And have you ever felt like, couldn't you have just said Reed's not here?
Yeah.
Right at the get-go, you just wasted 5 minutes of my life. Okay, that long answer is not concise. Reed is not here is concise. Make sense?
Like a short.
The short answer, the shortest possible way to ask a question is the concise way. Complex, it must be open-ended question. When we say open-ended, that means you can't answer with a simple yes or no, right? So if I ask you, are there a lot of religions in the United States?
Yeah.
It's yes. Is that a research question? But if I asked you, what are the differences between the religions in the United States?
Yes, that'd be it.
That would be, yeah, because you can't just say yes, no. You actually have to provide an answer. So anytime you have to provide an answer to a question, that is an open-ended question. And then arguable, it has to be debatable rather than accepted facts, okay? If I ask the question, first of all, does the earth revolve around the sun? That's not debatable. We have science as fact, right? Not only that, it's not a research question because why?
Because it's a yes or no question.
It's a yes or no question, right? So you want to make sure that it is debatable. Now, when it comes to debatable, I'm going to tell you something as the debate coach and just as a person that loves to debate, which is why I took philosophy. When you are researching anything or providing a research paper, I want you to think about it as if you are debating or trying to prove your point, okay? Now, here's the thing when it comes to debates. It's all fine and well for you to know your side backwards and forwards, right? But if you don't understand the opposing side, you will never win an argument. Here's why. Because you will never be able to take head on the other person's arguments. But if I know both my side and the other person's side, now anytime they try to attack what I know, I can say, well, I already knew about that, and here's a source, or here's some evidence that proves that wrong, okay? So that's why it's good to be knowledgeable as a whole. Even if I'm saying I'm for this, I need to know all the arguments against it. Make sense? Because then I can address it and I can wipe it out. Most of the time, I can wipe it out from the get-go because when I'm presenting my argument, I'm going to be like, well, I understand that you think ABC. Here's why ABC are wrong and here's why all mine is right. Have I left them anything to say? No. And most of the time, your opponent will be unprepared, right? Because they'll only know their side, so they won't know how to argue against it. Okay. So when you're doing something debatable, always know at least a general amount of information about it, okay? So this is the process on how we create it. We're gonna narrow the topics, think of questions, and focus the question, okay? So the way we narrow it is by deciding what kind of research we wanna do. There's 3 main types of research. There are some other ones, but these are the most common. So we have descriptive. Just like its name sounds, it's where you describe, okay? Then we have relational or comparative, right? What is the relationship or what are the similarities between, this tends to be your compare contrasts, right? And then you have causal. And just like it sounds, it's the cause of something. What is a cause? What are the outcomes? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, one good thing is when we're determining it, we can also use some similar sentence stems. Now, just like any type of sentence stems, you can use these when you are first starting out, right? And then as you become more comfortable generating research questions, you can span outside of these, okay? But descriptive normally starts with how much, what amount, what is, what are. Relational, what are the similarities between, what are the differences between? And causal, what is the relationship between, or what is the relationship amongst, okay? So here's what I tend to do just myself, because it makes my life easier. Whenever I get a topic or a prompt, I will actually generate questions for each category and then choose the one that I'm most interested in to be the one that I make sure is my research question, okay? And here's what I also do. Even when I'm just generating questions, I try to generate them in the form of a research question so that I just have to tweak it at the end. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to show you the process. So again, once I generate that question, I want to make sure that it's focused, and I'm going to make sure it's focused by making sure that it checks each box, okay? And a lot of times what I do is I'll write clear, focused, concise, complex, arguable, and then I'll be like, check, 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 check. If there's one that's missing, do I have to throw the whole question away?
Mm-hmm.
No, I just have to tweak it and make sure that it fits, okay? So here's just some examples. I'm not going to read all of them, but I just want to give you an idea what they look like. So descriptive, how many calories should children consume per week? How often do American students attend university overseas? And what action should social media sites take to protect users' information and privacy? You see how they're nice, short, concise, but they are arguable, they're debatable, they're not yes or no, right? Relational or comparative, what is the difference between children and teen caloric intake per week? What is the difference between the number of American European students attending university abroad? And what are the similarities in Facebook and Twitter users' privacy standards? Causal, what is the relationship between processed food advertising and American children's high caloric weekly intake? What is the relationship between the cost of American universities and the number of American students studying abroad? And what is the relationship between the privacy standards and social media sites and identity theft? So those are just some examples, okay? So now that you know all that, we're gonna go through the process ourselves, okay? So here is the initial prompt. Should a person with dissociative identity disorder, DID, be held accountable for their crimes? So first and foremost, do you guys know what DID is?
This whatever.
Multiple
Split personality.
Yes, so it used to be considered multiple personality disorder, but now it's considered dissociative identity disorder. Just a little thing of note. So whenever you're first introducing a term that has an acronym, you give us the full title here, and then in parentheses, you put DID. And once you've done that, you can use DID from then on, okay? Now, let's say you have a word count, and I shouldn't be telling you this, but whatever. Let's say you have a word count limit. Am I gonna wanna use DID or the whole title?
Yeah.
The whole time. I would use the whole title because that means every time I say it, that's 3 words.
Oh, okay. I think that worked.
Yes, work smarter, not harder. Okay, so first of all, does this count as a research question?
No, because it's a yes or no question.
Yeah, it's a yes or no question, right? Okay. So, and that seems to be the only thing that it's not missing, because can it be clearly understood without further explanation? We'll probably have to provide background information for DID, but that's not something you're gonna wanna put right here, right? Like, you're gonna explain that later. So, but we know what disease we're talking about, or mental disorder. Focused, is it narrow enough for required space? It could be, right? Concise, it is asked in the fewest words. It is not open-ended, so it doesn't meet that. And it could be arguable, right? So we just have to tweak it. All right. So let's go through this process. And again, what I like to do is I like to generate questions for each one so that I can see which one I like. So if I were to do a descriptive, right, which is how much, what amount, what is, or what are, what kind of question could I create for this one? Yeah, for the DID. So let me do this. So for descriptive, right?
Oh, Austin, six.
For descriptive, we normally have how much, what amount, which that doesn't make any sense, right? Or you could technically do, I'm just gonna give you one. How much accountability should a person with what?
DID.
And I'm just gonna put DID, right? Have for their crimes. Is that a research question?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, it is. And is it still, am I still getting to the core of that prompt? I am, right? So is there any other way that I could maybe do that?
What were the ones for the cause?
Okay, so let's look at the causal one. The causal is what is the relationship between or relationship among? And so we could use a stem, right? What is the relationship between what? DID and
their crimes or
the accountability or the level of accountability. The level of accountability. Oops, I misspelled it. Ability a person faces for what? For their crime.
Yay.
So now we have two research questions. What about a relational one or comparative?
What are the
So it says,
differences between
between, we could say crime accountability or criminal accountability,
really?
right?
I thought that would be, I didn't think it. I thought that would be wrong.
That's okay. So differences between criminal accountability
And DID.
for people with DID and what else?
And
Or versus people,
without.
yep, without DID, right? And I could write a paper for each of these, right? And it would still answer that one prompt, right? You see how it kind of, it can be a little hard, but as you get used to it, it's gonna get easier. And then here's what happens. So let's say I choose one of these and I start to research on it. And then I find more information that makes me want to make this more specific or a little bit broader. I can do that, right? I can easily change this as long as it's hitting all my marks. And the reason I want you to learn how to do this is I'm going to ask you to do this over the next 2 weeks when we do research things, because when you do get into college, there's going to be some professors that will tell you, I need you to include your research questions. And it should just be cake by then, okay? So, and it really does make like looking for research a lot easier. So out of these three, which would we be most interested in?
first
The
one,
easiest
it's shorter.
The shorter one, how much accountability should a person with DID have for their crimes?
Yeah,
Okay, and let's say we start to research and we find something that's more specific, we can definitely do that. Okay, so I do also want to show you something else, okay? So let's say I simply gave you let's say I gave you the topic of police reform.
police.
That's all I gave you. I said, I want you to go write a paper about police reform. Right? Well, you guys could talk about a lot of things, right? So let's generate maybe some questions. If we were supposed to do a descriptive one, if we chose a descriptive, what could I say?
Describe.
The simplest one.
Describe something.
So
Oh, what is police?
what is police reform?
I can't see the one at the bottom. I didn't know those were questions that we could have chose.
Because people tend to have misconceptions about this, right? Don't people have, some people think it means doing away with police altogether. Others just say, oh, we need to change the funding, right? So what is police reform, right? What are the effects? Right, effects of police reform. So that's two descriptive ones, right? Well, let's look at a relationship one.
What are the differences between police?
What are
What are the differences between?
wasn't there different types of police reform?
I not really get down.
What are the differences between the different types of police reform? Right? We could even say the similarities, right? What are the similarities
What's different?
of the different types of police reform? These are simple, right? That definitely starts me off. What about a causal? What is the relationship?
Between the different types of police reform.
Okay. So what is the relationship between the different types? Right?
Yep.
I can even go a little bit further. I could say, what is the relationship between police reform and police shootings? You see how I got more specific? So now, if I'm somebody that's interested in that, right? Or maybe police reform and community relations, police reforms and violent arrests, right? Because that's what a lot of the police reforms are targeting. So do you see how we can simply go from a topic, and by just going through this process, now we have questions and it makes it a little bit easier. And then you literally just say, okay, out of all of these, which one is the most interesting to me? And I can choose one. And here's the deal. It's just like a thesis statement. It can be modified. It can be changed to fit what you need it to be. So let's say I start doing what is police reform, and I start finding all these articles about how it's tied to how violent arrests occur. Well, then I can easily shift into one of these, right? Make sense?
Mhm.
So do you see how research questions can be helpful? Yes, no, maybe so?
Yep.
Okay, so tomorrow I'm gonna walk you through the process of actually looking up some of these things, because that's the thing too, is by creating your research questions, it provides you keywords to look up when you're doing your data search, okay? So we're gonna stop here for today. I am going to update all this information to a Google Drive form and share it with you guys so that you guys know what we're doing. And also, I'm going to include from the other classes, because what you're gonna learn is even if you have a single topic or the same prompt, different people come up with different questions. Your questions are very different from first periods, okay? That's why plagiarism is so easy to identify, because you two people always have the same exact thoughts. No, yes,
So let's say they were to have the same thoughts. Like it was like a small portion, like it's a simple sentence. And it was like just word for word, but at the same time, two completely different people thought of it.
so
How would that work?
first, that's very, even if they have the exact same thought, what is the likelihood that you'll say it word for word to somebody else? Slim to none, right? It's very rare, let's say you and Nia have the same thought on something, but are you gonna word it exactly the same? No. Because what influences our writing?
Everything else.
Everything about us, right? My writing is gonna be very different from y'all's writing, because why?
Because you have experienced more.
Yeah, my degree's in English, right? I've read a ton more than you guys ever have, right? I like to write. I like to use big words. I like to use complex sentences, right? I like all those things. But even if I was writing in a casual form, right? If I'm writing in a laid back way, I'm still gonna write different from you because, well, I'm a 42-year-old from Corpus Christi, Texas, right? And so my language is very different from y'all's. But even if you do have like a sentence that does match, let's say when you're in college and you submit a paper and it says, well, this sentence mirrored that sentence. If it's something as common as like, if you're answering the prompt word for word, of course people are gonna know that part, right? So they do take that into consideration. Any questions? All right, so for the rest of the class, I do want you to be working on any missing assignments. Again, I'm not taking up any points. Please just get it in because I want the class average to go up.